Passion has always been a weird topic in competitive Fortnite. For years, the culture has been that it's cool to not care. Players brag about barely playing the game and still being good, and joke about not practicing. But what would happen if the pro who cared the most teamed up with the player who put the most time into the game? Vico and Malibuca both had a really great 2025 in Europe, where Malibuca was able to get a 2nd and 4th in EU FNCS majors, ignoring his trio's hiccup in Major 3, where they didn't have a drop spot and got 23rd, while Vico's trio managed to get a 1st, 2nd, and 6th in the 3 majors. Unfortunately, at Global's 2025 in Lyon, Vico and Malibuca's teams got 14th and 8th respectively. These were decent placements for most Fortnite pros, but for Vico and Malibuca's standards, it left a lot to be desired. Regardless of how this LAN went for them, at Globals, we also saw the announcement of duos being the main game mode for FNCS in 2026, and after trying out with a couple teammates, we saw the announcement of Vico and Malibuca for duos for all events in 2026. This wasn't your average duo though. These are maybe the two most passionate players in all of Fortnite. Vico is the player who cares about the game and winning more than any other pro I've seen. He shows his emotions like no other pro, and clearly wants to be the best. Being a professional Fortnite player isn't about money to him. He truly wants to be great, and you can tell how much he cares about that. When his trio came 2nd in the last EU FNCS major of the year, this was his reaction. In his own way, Malibuca is extremely passionate about Fortnite too. He might not wear his heart on his sleeve the same way Vico does, but if you look at his Fortnite tracker, he often plays the same tournament on EU, Middle East, NA Central, and NA West. 4 different regions. He doesn't do this for every tournament, but it's more surprising if he doesn't play a tournament on at least 2 different regions instead of 1. And Malibuca has been doing this for years too, whether it's just for extra practice or just because he loves the game. You don't play NA West at 5 AM on 150 ping if you don't have insane passion for the game. Few duos have ever shown the same level of commitment these two have, and they were expected to dominate EU when they teamed up. But it didn't quite go to plan when tournament started. The first big duo tournament in 2026 was the first of 4 Reload Esports World Cup qualifiers. For the Esports World Cup, you represent your team in the finals, where given your performance in your respective game, your team gets points that get added up across games. The one thing that's different from traditional Fortnite is that you have to be on the same team as your teammate to gain points for your organization. Vico had been on Big Clan for a while, but with the Esports World Cup changing the dynamic of competitive Fortnite, we saw Malibuca picked up by Big, essentially locking them in as teammates for all EWC events, and likely for FNCS events as well. Vico and Malibuca were able to make it through the qualifiers pretty easily, and destroyed the lobby in their heat. When finals came, they placed 14th, not qualifying for the Esports World Cup LAN, and finishing in the bottom half of the lobby. This clearly meant a lot to Vico and Malibuca though, as they tweeted out that their performance was disappointing, where they apologized to their fans and promised to do better. This cold streak continued for Vico and Malibuca though. They placed 19th and 20th in the first 2 Div Cups of Chapter 7. Not what we expected. It wasn't looking good for them. A team that realistically should be competing for first every single tournament, not even close to the top. People started to talk about if they were going to split, and even though they'd both been signed to Big Clan for EWC, they didn't have to play together for Battle Royale events, and honestly, we've seen crazier things happen. But Malibuca and Vico insisted they were locked, and that both of them were having a ton of fun playing together, and they queued up for the next Div Cup. But after the first 4 games of the Div Cup, it was looking like more of the same, as they only had 104 points in 4 games and were nowhere near the top. But then, it felt like a switch had been flipped. Something was different in the last 2 games, and this is what happened.
Vico and Malibuca with a comeback though. 184 on the high ground. It's a 2v1 right now on the high ground. 9 builds, no Kif on the low ground. Fish in a barrel, no Kif wins this. It's horrific looks for Mali and Vico. Of course, they win a 10 elimination win. Kaiser's looking like it's quick to follow. It's going to be a win, I feel like, but it's back-to-back double-digit elim wins. 2 insane games. 6 builds for Mali, could still lose this. Dama Damus. Another team's been underperforming, trying to have a big game here. Dam's jousting with Malibuca off the Fizzberry. And it's an 11 elimination win for Malibuca and Vico.
Vico and Malibuca ended the tournament with 2 consecutive wins, finishing the tournament in 2nd place. Almost an insane comeback tournament win. We saw that if they're able to put themselves in a good position from the mid games, they were an insane endgame team. It was clear they were going to stick together now and try and figure it out, which was great to see as they clearly were enjoying playing together. But in the 4th Div Cup of the season, we saw an abysmal start by their standards again, only having 1 good game in the first 4. But again, they ended the tournament with 2 back-to-back 11 kill wins, launching them into 2nd for another insane tournament finish. Vico and Malibuca came so close to first twice in the last Battle Royale tournament of Chapter 7 Season 1, but heading into Chapter 7 Season 2, we really started to see what we were promised with them. Right before Season 2 dropped, we saw Vico and Malibuca place 3rd in the second Reload Elite Series qualifier, confirming their qualification for the Esports World Cup, a huge turnaround from the last qualifier. They had a couple issues in the Div Cups that season, but won a Div Cup and placed 2nd and 5th in some of the others. We could see that sticking together had started to work for this team. Even if it didn't start how they wanted, these are two of the players who wanted to win more than anyone else, and with that kind of passion and motivation, it made sense that they had put the pieces together. Heading into the first FNCS major of the new chapter, Vico and Malibuca were in most people's top 5s after they had such a strong few Div Cups leading up to it, and they were many people's pick to take home the whole tournament. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out exactly how they wanted though. Going into the final game of day 2, they were over 200 points behind first place, all the way down in 5th with no real shot to take home the tourney. But as we've seen at the end of tournaments, they always seem to finish strong, and that held true here. Vico and Malibuca managed an 8-kill 3rd, launching them into 3rd to finish off the major. A good performance for sure, but not the first place they wanted. We again saw what they were capable of from endgames, but they just needed to figure out their consistency, as they had quite a few games where they barely got any points. But really, the main takeaway from this major wasn't Vico and Malibuca, rather Sky and Scroll's absolutely dominant performance. Sky and Scroll had been the best team on EU all year long, winning 3 Div Cups and getting multiple top 3s, and in Grand Finals of Major 1, they destroyed the region with one of the craziest match histories we've ever seen. They played perfect Fortnite, barely messing up, and going into Game 11 with only 2 games left, they were about to pull so far ahead of 2nd place and make it impossible to win. So the 2nd place team of Chino and Pablo Wingu decided to land on them, and this happened.
But Sky, Scroll, Chino, Pablo, what are you doing next to each other? Chino and Pablo, they want to take this for themselves. They're not leaving it up to fate. Who's going to be the first one down the hill? Sky beats them to the punch. Chino is down. Pablo is finished. Sky and Scroll win out with the surprise off-spawn contest.
Shockingly, another moment of perfection from Sky and Scroll, dominating them off spawn, and going on to finish the tournament in style. They were looking like the best team in the world, especially with Peterbot and Poyo faltering, unable to win Grand Finals on NA Central. They just didn't mess up at all. Their early games were perfect, their mid games were perfect, their end games were perfect, and when they weren't, they solo clutched like prime Peterbot. It wasn't the most exciting finals to watch solely because they were just too good, and it really never felt close except for the moment they got landed on. There was another crucial part of this major finals. If you placed well, it qualified you to Fortnite's first ever mid-year FNCS LAN, otherwise known as the Major 1 Summit LAN. From this FNCS, both Sky and Scroll and Vico and Malibuca qualified to the LAN with no problem, as the top 20 teams from EU Major 1 secured their spot at LAN. Major 1 was certainly exciting, but it did kind of feel like it was all part of the lead up to the Summit LAN, as international tournaments like this really determine who the best team in the world is, when the best teams from EU and NA can directly compete against each other. There were a few divisional cups before the LAN, and Vico and Malibuca did pretty well, but there's one important tournament that we need to look at. On the divisional cup that took place on May 9th, Vico and Malibuca were playing really well, racking up 272 points in the first 5 games. But of course, they happened to be behind who else but Sky and Scroll, by over 60 points too. To win this tournament, they would need an insane last game, and for Sky and Scroll to get a 0-pointer. So they decided to take matters into their own hands. They landed near Sky and Scroll's drop instead of on them, knowing that Sky and Scroll could have just drawn out the fight, ensuring that neither of them could do well, which would mean Sky and Scroll would win the tournament since they were in first. They looted up right under Sky and Scroll's nose, and completely unaware of the presence of Vico and Mali, they did this.
One of them's coming to me though. Come on. Hit it.
Nice, nice, nice. Okay, he went back down.
He's on me.
He's running, kind of. Yeah. Oh, 150.
Another team, watch out.
Yeah.
Watch out.
Finish him. Yeah. That.
Nice, watch out, another team. Akira Kurama.
Yeah, but...
They took down first, an insane play to take matters into their own hands, but they still needed a really good game to win the tournament, and this is what happened.
Okay. One kill.
Come.
Look. Kill this guy. That.
Nice, Mali.
I kill him. Stop forward. One soul. Hey, you back close. Did I try to go in? Top 3. You found 2. No nuts. Is it type? Yeah. Gonna be alive. Soul and do. This soul. Nice! Do left. Nice. They might be low. They didn't get killed. Just play like time. Make them think you're full HP. Nice. You can get finished. Nice. Shot.
They did it. They again showed how clutch they are at the end of tournaments. And not only that, we saw that Sky and Scroll weren't impervious. They were beatable, and they should have been more ready for a play like this. It seemed the perfect team was showing weakness. You could tell how much this meant to them from their reaction. Their hard work was paying off. At the end of the day though, it was still a Div Cup, and going into the Summit LAN, Sky and Scroll were still the heavy favorites to win the whole tournament. There was also another crucial detail ahead of Summit LAN that I hadn't mentioned yet. See, normally in these LAN tournaments, it's a 12-game format where they play 6 games on Saturday and Sunday. This time around though, there was a bit of an issue with software that some Fortnite pros were using that used the game files to show additional stats and information on the screen while they were playing. Fortnite ended up banning many top players who used this software ahead of Major 1, which a large portion of the community was not happy with. For better or for worse, Fortnite bent the knee to the banned players, and made a second chance qualifier to make LAN for anyone who didn't do well, or for the players that were banned for using the software. Because of this, Fortnite had to change the LAN format since there were now 75 teams in attendance instead of 50. How they went about this is that the 50 teams who initially qualified for LAN started an upper bracket, where they played 6 games on Friday and the top 25 teams qualified for the finals, and the bottom 25 teams had to play in the lower bracket on Saturday with the 25 additional teams that qualified through the last chance qualifier. Then, out of the 50 total teams in the lower bracket, the top 25 teams would qualify for the finals on Sunday, where we would have 50 teams total. The one problem with this is that there was now going to be an 8-game finals, 4 less than the 12 we were used to. Regardless of this though, going into day 1 of finals, all Vico and Malibuca had to do was make top 25 to secure their spot in finals. A pretty easy goal for a team as good as them, and this is what happened in the first game. They landed at their normal drop of North Frigid Fortress, which they had uncontested and looted up. The zone was a center pole in this game, which gives Vico and Malibuca a really strong pathway to rotate. Because Frigid Fortress has such a high elevation, they can stay up and scout their rotate as well as look for storm surge tags. Another part of the map they have access to for southern rotates is this ravine, where they can move freely using the natural cover and set up in the center of the map. Even though it's only the 3rd zone, notice how careful they are to not take any damage. With the new storm surge mechanic, where it's based off of damage given minus damage taken, taking any damage in the mid game could be game ending when storm surge kicks in. So they use wood to cover angles and overdrive grenades so they're difficult to shoot, where they set up on a spot to refarm metal and box up. From this spot they can both look for surge tags as well as not be at risk of taking damage. Staying in one spot for a while decreases the chances of you taking damage exponentially. When the 5th zone pulls, they have a pretty free overdrive to zone, where they can go back to their old builds from earlier. The 6th zone is a really bad pull for them though, so they overdrive early, pause for a second so they can coordinate another overdrive rotate, and wrap around the cliffside here where they're able to tarp in. Because they've done a good job at not revealing themselves to the lobby at all, they are way above the surge damage threshold at this point. Not only that, Vico looked through his cone on the backside of zone, where he's able to catch repairs rotating, and then Pieces escapes to take him down easily. Again, they get a really bad pull for the 7th zone here. When the zone is starting to pull, they set up to overdrive and pause after taking damage. Vico and Mali know that it's more important to get in with as little damage taken as possible, so they don't get greedy and instead use multiple overdrives each rotate instead of trying to run into zone. Vico gets hit really hard on rotate, but finds a great spot on the front of zone, where he can heal back to full HP. This time when they rotate in the 8th zone though, they get separated, and Vico finds a kill, but gets double sprayed in his back and taken out. Malibuca's a very good solo player though, and he rotates to frontside and fully boxes up in metal. He rotates again, but gets absolutely beamed out of the air, and unfortunately falls in 13th place, with only 2 kills to their name. Not a bad game, and if they kept having games like this, they would easily be on pace to qual, as the qualifying range was probably going to be around 110 points. If they just had one really good game though, they would qualify through to day 2 easily, and in game 2, that's exactly what they were looking to do. In game 2 of day 1, they continued their normal strategy landing at Frigid Fortress. Malibuca loots a lot of the main area, and Vico goes to some surrounding areas and farms up metal there. This zone is really good for them though, as it's pulling right around the Frigid Fortress area, where they can base up in a surge base all the way to the 4th zone, allowing them to look for tags and ensuring that they aren't hit. Ahead of the 5th zone, we see them do an interesting strat. Based off the fact that most teams were on the edge of zone here, including them, they knew if it pulled anywhere north or west they would want to move there immediately. Because of that, they have their rotate pre-planned out here, and when it's confirmed the zone pulls in this direction, they instantly overdrive to zone, allowing them to get ahead of everyone else. They're able to make it in. Unfortunately, the zone pulls up the mountain though. Instead of prioritizing moving to zone though, Vico and Malibuca go straight up to start the rotate by Fizz shocking. They were totally buried beforehand. And now, they've gotten up and have really good lines to rotate, so they play themselves and solo shock to zone, ensuring that they don't get buried in this situation. They're able to make it in on a good layer since they focus so much on their elevation before going to zone. Vico and Mali hear a lot of fighting below them, and are able to open up and easily take down Pixie, and Malibuca makes a great play of placing a pre-edited wall to get in quicker so they can take down Swizzy easily too. Vico and Malibuca are now in a situation on the back of zone with no clear path to rotate through. Because of this, they throw down a Fizz grenade in Storm, use Chug Splashes to heal their white health, and launch to the front of zone, where they can slide jump with the fizz and overdrive effect, and pick up a really good layer where they haven't gone down the mountain but are still in. They overdrive when the 8th zone starts to pull, but they're starting to run low on mats. Because of this, Malibuca drops down to low ground and uses his remaining mats to build a nice tarp so they can look for anyone with low mats for a refresh. Unfortunately though, they got separated, but Vico finds a really good layer that they can hide in and look for refreshes. Vico and Mali do something really crucial finding low mat refreshes. They hold their angles instead of looking all around. Because of that, Malibuca is ready when Veloz runs into his line of sight and takes him out. They get some mats from that, but not enough to make a huge tunnel, and they have to lurk on backside now. Vico and Malibuca notice more fighting in front of them though, and they're able to spray in and take out Focus in this situation. Malibuca tries to wrap around the edge of zone, but runs into Eyedrop and Marius who manage to take him down, leaving Vico as a solo. Vico is also a ridiculously good solo player though. The zone pulls up the hill, and Vico tanks Storm with his Chug Jug before Darm ends up right in front of his box for an easy refresh and Siphon, allowing him to tank even more Storm damage. Darm's duo Damish is close to follow though, and they trade damage, but with the Siphon, Vico knows he can outlast him before Damish goes down to Storm for even more Siphon, 2 pieces of pizza, and some more overdrives. Vico recognizes quickly though that the zone is going to pull back down from the split, so he can go to low ground when the zone opens up to him to save a lot of mats, which he has a ton of now. Vico is now on the low ground in the final 3 teams, and with all of these builds, he's pretty much ensured to get top 2, where he finds the weak mat in for another refresh. Unfortunately though, his run ends here, as Acorn and Bolts are healthy on the high ground and take him down. Even if Vico didn't win, it was still a really great solo clutch, and an 8 kill second immediately qualified them to day 2. The next 4 games would just be for practice for them, since they already were in the top 25 at this point, and we could tell that they were feeling really comfortable and having a lot of fun after those first few games, as they were both rocking the Princess Fishstick skin in Game 5 and the Anakin Skywalker skin in Game 6. Not really skins you see a ton of comp players using. It may have been small, but the fact that they were feeling so good after their performance was a great sign going into the finals, and were looking like the Vico and Malibuca we were promised going into finals. Nothing too notable that really affected them happened during the lower bracket. They still had their part of Frigid Fortress uncontested, and going into finals Sunday, Vico and Malibuca had 8 games to show what they could do. In game 1 of day 2, things started off normal. Vico lands on the outskirts, and Malibuca lands in the main part of Frigid. This game had a really good zone pull for them, where they can sit in Frigid all the way to 5th zone. They're able to get ahead in the 6th zone, and Vico looks back for 3 picks on players, getting some early kill points to start out the finals. Unfortunately though, they just aren't able to find a refresh and go down early in 15th place, meaning they weren't even in the top 10 to start the tournament. Not only that, the favorites to win the tournament, Sky and Scroll, had a 5 kill 6th place, a really strong start, and Shark and Teeny, another team expected to do really well, won the game. While it was only 1 game, Sky and Scroll play perfect Fortnite. They almost never go down early and almost always make it to the top 5 somehow. Vico and Malibuca would fall behind big if they had another game like this. In game 2, they needed a good game to even stay in the race for first since it was an 8-game format. Well, in game 2, they did exactly that. This game was a southeast zone, so they had to travel past Sandy Strip to get in. They make it in by overdriving in the 5th zone, and Malibuca is able to find a kill on the Yapko, but doesn't get the loot, and the 6th zone was a really solid pull for them. An interesting note though is that Vico carried a harpoon into the endgame here, while Malibuca had all of the overdrive grenades. When the 6th zone appears, Vico notices the old loot from Yapko, which he's able to snag with the harpoon, normally a very risky pile of loot to go for. On top of the supply drop they're able to claim right as it falls by their base, they're absolutely stacked going into the endgame due to their clever plays. They again got a decent pull, allowing them to look back for picks where Malibuca finds a pick on a Madden on the back of zone. Vico and Mali then overdrive to zone when the storm gets closer, and make it in with tons of space where they box up in metal. They move when the 8th zone starts to pull, and then absolutely decimate Saez for a kill. We see some incredible awareness from Malibuca here. He remembers where their old builds are on low ground, and even if they have a decent mid-ground layer, he drops down to preserve materials. Most players don't think he will get edited on old builds, so because Malibuca identified this, Vico can pick up a free kill onto Kurama in the back of their tarp. We see this even more from them. Malibuca finds kills onto both Pablo, Wingu, and Chino in the back of zone because the opponents did not expect players to be in old, fully built metal. Malibuca and Vico now have insane materials and heals, so what they do instead of panicking and trying to get in is break their way into the back of Storm while using their chug splashes to heal, then overdrive into a really high layer where they can full tarp. After being focused by height, they drop down to the low ground on this rotate, where Malibuca can full tarp on the front of zone, where he tanks Storm to claim space before any other team can get there. They see Belusi near them, but want to make sure they have a free rotate, so they spray him really hard to get him off his lair, forcing Belusi to drop and leave his box, where Malibuca is able to find him through his edits on the backside for a free kill. Vico and Malibuca are making sure to wrap on the edge of zone here, doing this so that they won't have to cover both sides of them to conserve mats and give them good sight lines on the lobby. We see that the zone is again pulling up a hill, so Vico and Mali again do a good job on prioritizing getting up immediately so they aren't caught in a weird spot, and they claim the low ground when they make it up the hill. At this point, so many players died on the rotation up the hill, and there were only 3 teams left, so Vico and Mali make a play for height. Unfortunately, Malibuca gets lasered out of the air, leaving Vico as a solo, and who else would be on the low ground but Scroll? This could be a huge swing here if Vico could take him out, but he gets hit really hard. Vico doesn't panic though, and goes and heals in Storm with his pizza, making it so that Scroll ran out of time to hide and goes down to Agers, allowing Vico to get the second place with 7 kills. This was a huge game, and launched them into 3rd place on 118 points, and they were now only behind the 2 other EU giants of Teeny and Shark, and of course, Sky and Scroll. But their next 2 games were not great. In game 3, Kingling and Craze intercepted their tunnel and took out Vico, and Malibuca got double spread in the back for a 1 kill 20th place. And in game 4, they ran out of mats early in the end game and went down in 17th. And if you show a little further into game 4, look who is racking up a ton of solo clutch points. A 6th place for Sky and Scroll off of an insane solo clutch from Scroll. And the game before, Sky and Scroll picked up a 9 kill game off of another absurd solo clutch from Scroll, where he clutched a 2nd place. We were now halfway through the tournament, and Vico and Malibuca only gained 48 points from those games, while Sky and Scroll were now over an entire victory royale worth of points ahead of Shark and Teeny in 2nd. This duo actually seemed unstoppable. It was looking like this was going to be a boring tournament, but if we've learned one thing from Vico and Malibuca, it's that they're a second half team. Game 5 was a good zone pull for them again, as they didn't really have to move until the 4th zone. They make a really smart call here though. They notice a team with their tops open looking really heavily for surge tags, meaning that they were probably below the storm surge threshold, and likely tanking storm surge damage. Not only that, Vico and Malibuca notice them throw a fizz grenade down to counter any incoming storm damage, so they overdrive on top of them and land in their box where they're easily able to wipe them, giving them ridiculously good mats and heals for the endgame and putting them way above the surge damage threshold. Vico makes a huge base for them to give them a better elevation to rotate from and to tarp back into zone with all the extra mats from the kills there, and they actually end up pulling for a 6th zone. For their next rotate, they have a free overdrive pass since they're so high up, and can make a nice tarp to look for edits. Well, they notice fighting below them, where they can open on Tinka and easily take him out due to their strong positioning. This next rotation is a little sketch though, since they have the ice effect on this part of the map, and there's a high risk of players looking back at them, so they tank Storm with their chug jugs before overdriving in together to be extra safe. They know with how good their mats and heals are, that any unnecessary risk isn't worth it, even if it means tanking some storm damage. They overdrive twice more to make it to the front of low ground, where Malibuca claims a ton of space for them. Vico and Mali are able to open up on King as they notice he's in a single wood box, a good sign that he shambles in a solo, and get a free kill. So Malibuca throws an overdrive off the ground, bumping their heads on the roof and canceling any fall damage on the way down. They have so many white heals so they can tank Storm until the zone arrives to them, and landing way ahead of zone like this allowed them to take out the unsuspecting Hari from behind. Look at how much they tank Storm here, wrapping in zone to ensure they don't get cut off and edited on by other teams, and allowing them to take the front side of low ground. Unfortunately, after they get in, Malibuca gets decimated by Darmadamish when he goes for their wall, leaving Vico as a solo, who goes down soon after. A huge game for them, a 4-kill 6th, launching them into 3rd place, and surprisingly, Sky and Sorol only got 18th place that game, putting them only 54 points out of 1st place. There was one other small note though. See, a team you might have heard of once or twice was only on 70 points after the first 4 games, but they had a really good win this game to launch them into 10th. That is of course Peterbot and Pollo.
Side is completely out of reach, but Pete and Pollo, they're more concerned about the high ground.
Want to keep a hold of the front side alone.
But they are dropping down. Ree and Cooper, they've overthrown Peterbot and Pollo on the high ground. The tables have turned. Vico's now forced to clutch up, but high ground continues to fight it out. Ree and Cooper will not be denied. 2v1 situation on height, but they lose it all. Pollo is answering back with elimination of his own, but it only starts with a knock.
Cooper's spinning it forward, but he won't get to stay here in the lobby. Pollo bringing it back. Fully rise when the moment calls you most, when the lights are at their brightest. Damage is fully cracked. A big 150 pump. Pollo's got the chug jug. He's sitting back. Another shot at the door. A first bucket been applied. Oh, damage is out of here.
Pete and Pollo are still seen as the best duo in the world by many, and despite their disappointing start, they threw their hat into the ring with this game. They were a team to keep an eye on. Regardless though, Sky and Scroll were still in 1st place, and Vico and Malibuca would need to repeat their success in Game 5 to stay in contention. In Game 6, they had some bad luck though. Vico got aggressive in the early game and took out Madden, and they were able to wipe the duo a little later in the game for 2 early kills. But Vico got 3-2-1'd and jumped in on by Josh and Ianzo, causing Malibuca to have to reboot him. Not only that, it was a south pull, making it more difficult difficult for them to get into zone, spending all this time in storm and having to reboot. They do make it to the endgame though, and Vico beams Fukun out of the air for a free kill, but by the 8th zone, they're basically out of mats due to their tough position. Vico is able to take down Chino, but they're still insanely shambles playing on the low ground now. Vico finds a huge pump onto Josh, who goes down to Storm, but unfortunately they can't get the refresh from it, losing out on some much needed materials. Malibuca does find a really nice refresh on Alewa as a solo, allowing them to tarp for a little while with the mats from the refresh. Unfortunately though, since they didn't have a lot of materials, they had to stand on other teams' old builds, allowing Flixie and Chat to take them down in 12th place. This was a solid game, a 6-kill 12th, but this time, Sky had an insane solo clutch for a 3rd place this game. This duo was just too consistent. Vico and Mali did move into 2nd from this game, but Sky and Scroll were now 62 points ahead of them, with only 2 games to go. It just felt like they were going to run away with it. But something interesting happened in Game 7. Sky and Scroll were seemingly in a great position. Zone was a Battlewood pull, and they were looking set up to have a really strong endgame. But out of nowhere, Peterbot and Poyo W-key Sky and Scroll, and take out Sky in the mid game, and Scroll goes down in 39th place with 0 kills, a 0-point game for them. If you know anything about Peterbot and Poyo, they don't play for anything other than first. And although they were in 9th place going into this game, they knew that if they wanted the gold medal, they would have to make a huge play. Vico and Malibuca, on the other hand, just kept playing out their game. They find a pick on Zangi as a solo on the back of zone and are able to overdrive right when the 7th zone starts to pull, where they can make it up the hill and claim the front side of zone. Vico and Mali are in a bit of a rough spot though, buried behind builds with no clear path to zone, so they use their classic solution to tank Storm with white heals, then overdrive from Storm to the front of zone for a great position up the hill. They continue to overdrive and full tarp on high layers, playing textbook Fortnite, but are starting to run low on mats. Zone does pull back though, allowing them to go into their old builds on the mid ground, and they eagle-eye Kingling and are able to jump in on him to take him out. Again, they retreat into old builds on the mid ground, as that wasn't a huge refresh and Malibuca's super weak. Mali does get taken down pretty quickly after, leaving Vico as a solo, who manages to clutch a 5th place for them. A very good game, and with Sky and Scroll's 0-point game, they were now only 10 points off of 1st place going into the final game. But you might have noticed something different about this leaderboard. After taking down Sky and Scroll in the mid game, Peterbot and Poyo went on to do this.
Poyo from low ground to into the clouds.
We've seen them climb bigger mountains before.
Player on high, ultimate high ground will be their winning contention point.
It's really all up to them. Peterbot and Poyo, their 6th elimination of the game, and it's on the next team in their path.
Now they just gotta look up.
Here comes the drop. Peterbot and Poyo, they want the back-to-back. Big shot on the read. Poyo will not go down, but Peterbot will, so he's stuck by himself yet again here. It's all or nothing. He does it again. Another big shot. Poyo will not be denied, and he's placing it on his own.
This was not just down to Vico and Malibuca and Sky and Scroll. Pete and Poyo now had a real chance to win, especially since they're known to take matters into their own hands in the final game to win a tournament. Vico and Malibuca were now directly up against the best duo of all time and the current best duo in the world going into the final game. Not only that, Shark and Teeny were right on their tail too. Could they clutch up and show that their passion for the game could fuel them to an international win, or would they fold in the final moment? Again though, something interesting happened in the final game of the tournament. Sky and Scroll hadn't been landing at this hill in their previous games, but going into the final game, they got nervous that one of the other top teams in contention was going to contest them off spawn, so they ended up diving in and swerving to this hut here, and this happened.
Everybody is gonna do their best from their own spot. Demo and Kazi, they're gonna play spoiler here. What's going on? Hold on a minute. Scroll and first.
He gets the AR. He gets tagged up though.
Sky and Scroll went down off-spawn to Kazi and Damo, an Australian team. Many people thought they were griefed, but Kazi and Damo had been landing at this hill in the final 4 games of the tournament, and Sky and Scroll swerved here instead of their normal drop. Just like that, Vico and Malibuca were in 1st place, but they weren't home safe yet. With how insane Pete and Poyo had been playing in the second half of the tournament, they would need an insane finish to the tournament to take home the win. Vico and Malibuca were able to make it into the 6th zone with no problem, and get a good zone pull for the 7th zone, where they can overdrive in and attach to a redwood tree to set up on a high layer. Vico and Mali know it's crucial to not take unnecessary risks on this rotate, so they tank Storm before overdriving to the front of zone for the 8th zone rotate, and get a really good layer on the front of low ground, allowing them to full tarp in. Everything was on the line, and this is what Vico and Malibuca did. 4-kill fourth, putting them on 406 points. But was it enough? The tournament wasn't over yet. We can't forget about Peterbot and Pollo. And while Vico and Mali had their good game, this is what Peterbot and Pollo did.
Rebuilds are established, but Peterbot's ready to fire off.
A battle for high ground. It's inevitable.
This is the present. Pollo, once again, has to show why he has been the best player in this lobby all day long.
The Pollo still alive as a solo. I'm not sure what the point gap actually is. If he needs all the eliminations, if he needs the victory royale, but if there's one person this weekend that proved he will not go down without a fight, it's this man here, proving that maybe chickens can fly.
And all Pollo has to do is see if he can get the first bit of confirmation. Epic and Pop underneath. Pollo, can he do it a third time? But it's a matchup. Epic, Whale, and Pop.
When the dust settled, Vico and Malibuca were your FNCS Summit champions. They showed that true passion and love for the game paid off. For years, Fortnite's culture rewarded acting like you didn't care. Vico and Malibuca did the opposite. They cared about every tournament, every mistake, and every loss. And in the end, the two players who cared the most were the ones standing on top.
I promised my mom I was gonna win this year, and I mean,
And she's watching you right now. Is there anything you want to say to her?
Mama, ich hab's geschafft. Ich bin der beste Spieler der Welt.